Hello, everyone. We're just going to do this part two really quickly. Some of the end of the Mongols dynasty. I think the Yuan dynasty in China. I think a couple of things just to keep in mind. The debate that we had in class used quite a bit of information that would have been applicable to the beginnings of the Mongol rule in China. For example, under Kublai Khan, you have, maybe some things that the Mongols do to try to maintain some of the Chinese political system. And then maybe at the same time, there's a great deal of resentment amongst the Chinese and a great deal of oppression. So both of those things are happening. But at the same time, you do have a change after the death of Kublai Khan. The Mongols are going to be experiencing quite a bit of challenges. So, a couple of things to note. Even in 1274 and 1281, you do have Kublai Khan's attempt to attack militarily Japan, and that is not something that is successful for the Mongols. It leads to a great deal of cost and expense, and also likely some degree of humiliation for Kublai Khan. Taxes are going to increase as a result of some of these expenses, some of these campaigns that are military campaigns that don't necessarily become successful. You also see some later in the timeline crackdowns against particular groups of people that may have been tolerated or accepted in the past. One example would be Muslims. There are some policies toward the end of Kublai Khan's reign that start to become very, very, like a lot less favorable toward religious tolerance for Muslims. And we also do see the reconstituted exam. There is the civil exam, and it does make a comeback, but it doesn't come back anywhere near where it was in the Song Dynasty, and it also doesn't really it comes back, way too little too late. It is not going to be a significant shift in increase for Confucian scholars. Kublai Khan will die in 1294, and there are quite a few things that happen after this date. One is there's a really significant turnover of emperors and quite a few weak emperors. So, it's important to keep in mind, and this is almost like a counter argument in the debate. If you're looking at the way the Mongols ruled in China, some of what we might think is like contributions that the Mongols bring to China, mostly happen under the first emperor, Kublai Khan. Later on, there's quite a few weak emperors, and so much so that emperors, completely change over so quickly. And this cycle happens at the same time that there's also a lot of natural disasters. For example, the plague that we sometimes might attach to Europe, where a good percentage of Europeans are killed in the middle of the 1300s by a plague. That's likely a global plague, and it affects China quite significantly and travels likely through some of the Mongols, empire. And so there are stories of the Mongols throwing plague-ridden bodies, even though they didn't have awareness of, disease in the same way that we might today. The Mongols notably did use plague-ridden bodies, as a form of like weaponry. And the plague was very, very well documented in China. And so it's pretty extensive. And some of the weakening of the government at a time where there's a great deal of disease increasing creates a great deal of chaos. And so the end of the Mongols is really long before the Mongols are chased by Chinese out of China. The Mongols are on the decline and poorly ruling after 1294. We can see by 1367 that there's a rebel army, and notably the dynasty that will replace the Yuan dynasty is going to be a Chinese dynasty led by somebody from a peasant background. So the Ming dynasty, which becomes a very significant dynasty in Chinese history, kind of starts in the time period of the unfolding of the Mongol rule. So just kind of keep that in mind. It's a significant end, and the Mongols are in a conflict with a rebel army when they are opposed and then pushed back, outside of China. A couple of other things I'll note. I'm just going to show this map, and a couple of you asked about, what you might need to know regarding the map. I think it's useful to know this is dated 1294. Some of the Khanate, so the Khanate of the Great Khan, this is really the Great Khan being Kublai Khan, or the Khan of the Yuan dynasty. This is where we see, the Mongols in China. Note you can see quite a few of the cities. Modern day Beijing, the Mongols called Dadu. Kaifeng is on the map. Hangzhou is on the map. You can also see Karakoram, which is really the Mongol capital. Quite a few people, after various conquests, would be brought back to Karakoram. So it becomes a very developing space. And there are Mongols who never leave Karakoram. And there's kind of an infighting thing going on between the Yuan dynasty leading Mongols and some of the more nomadically oriented Mongols in Karakoram, who fight for kind of a traditional lifestyle on the steppes. Lots of these folks might look down at somebody like Kublai Khan for ruling in a style that appears to be less nomadic. But in any case, there is a great deal of tension between Kublai Khan, the ruler, the Great Khan, and outside leading Mongols who are really questioning Kublai Khan's rule. You also can see the Khanate of the Golden Horde, and noted there's the Kipchak people. This is another nomadic group, and we know, well, the Mongols don't assimilate into China, and there's no degree of intermarriage. We do get a very, very different type of assimilation in the Russian case study. We don't really see the Mongols assimilate into Russian society and become kind of part of the political system of the Russian princes, but rather they will assimilate into nomadic group of people that live on the steppes. So they will kind of melt, in a sense, into the steppes and into the cultures of the Kipchak people. You can see Moscow on the map. You can also see Kiev. Both Ukraine and Russia share some of this Mongol history. And as we noted in class, there's a great deal of conquest, but it is quite selective. And one of the big things that really ends up being significant about the Mongols in Russia, one is they stay for some time. So even long after the Yuan dynasty has collapsed, and maybe there is assimilation in Persia, the Mongols of the Golden Horde are still in place, and in some cases still collecting tribute. And this entire tribute system that mandates goods and pay from Russian princes, completely changes the relationship between the Russian princes with each other. So the power dynamics gets all mixed up with the kind of players of the Mongols, and we do see a lot of the power of the princes, move north to Moscow as a result of the Mongols. At least that's an argument. You can see Chaghatay's Khanate and Tashkent, right? So some of the spaces that would be in Central Asia today, so maybe like Uzbekistan, Bukhara. So sometimes when we're talking about Persia, we might be referring to the Chagatai Khanate. Chagatai is just the name of one of the Mongols, and he becomes kind of responsible for this particular area of political rule. And the Ilkhanate, unlike the Great Khan, the Ilkhanate is like the Lesser Khan. So in Persia, we can see in this case the city of Baghdad. So that becomes really significant. And, when we talk about the Pax Mongolica, or some of the argument that the Mongols really create an economic space, almost like a giant free trade zone, part of what the Mongols are really significant for is even though we had various empires on the ground already, you had empires in Western Africa, and you had empire, maybe the Byzantine Empire or the empire, the Islamic empires. You have a connecting of all of these various empires with the Empire of China, kind of looking at, maybe new spaces of trade, from end to end of Eurasia and Africa. And that becomes really significant because the degree of trade kind of sets up some of the interactions for the next period of world history. So I hope that that helps. I will see you in class, and Friday's the quiz or Monday.